Hey, can we talk for a second? It's about Amphimancer and like the content I'm making here. So the overall idea was that we would do a daily live stream, bam, and where we write a story, bam, edit it into a video, bam, and then somehow profit. I don't really know how we were gonna do that, but profit would somehow come in some way. But like, I kind of forgot about like one really integral component of this entire equation, and that's that I suck. Like, I really suck. I'm kind of bad at everything. And case in point, I actually did a live stream like a month ago. Like a month ago, I did a live stream where we wrote a video. Sorry, we wrote a story, and the story was really good. And I really liked the story, and I wanted to publish the story, but I couldn't because, again, I suck. I just suck. I suck so much. I'm so bad at everything, and I don't know what I'm doing. So, like, I didn't put the video out, and I decided that today I'm going to make up for lost time, and I'm going to actually put out the story that we wrote a month ago, and we're going to keep going as if nothing ever happened. Okay, sorry about that. Here's a prompt. Your party thinks you're a deadweight since they're too good to even need a healer. Little did they know about all the buffs and protection magic you give them during dungeon raids. It is honestly a pretty generic shonen prompt that I pretty much overlooked, but then I started thinking about it, right? So this prompt has kind of two sides to the story. One, you've got the party, which I assume is like a typical shonen party. You've got like probably some hero with some sort of sword or something like that. Here they are holding a sword. You probably have like a saint in the background, cross here. Maybe they're smiling. Probably a girl, because girls are in shonen. And then like probably an archer. Here just depicted as a bow and arrow because no one actually cares. And then you've got the dungeon. The thing about this particular prompt is it specifies that there are dungeon raids, but it doesn't really specify who the party is. And I started thinking about it some more, and I kind of like the idea of telling a story from the perspective of the dungeon master, right? Like they're there protecting their dungeon. They do it day in, day out. They've come to love not only like the space that is the dungeon, but also the creatures that they've created for the dungeon and the things that live in the dungeon, like their family, their friends that are there. And if we think of that as the party, I started thinking this actually could be a pretty good prompt. And that's kind of all I had to start the story with. I said, hey, let's tell this story not from the perspective of the party, but from the perspective of the dungeon master. And let's see if we can make the dungeon master a redeemable person. Now, onto the reading. A walk down memory lane. Many years ago, in the middle of a harsh winter, I found shelter in a small cave on the side of a mountain. It was barely big enough to hold me and certainly didn't provide any warmth. But given the circumstances, I wasn't too picky. So I turned my back to the storm and huddled with myself for warmth. I somehow made it through the night. With the snow settling up to my hip, it was physically impossible for me to make my way back down the mountain. I remember sitting in my little cave and wishing for so many things. I wanted more shelter, I wanted food, but most importantly, I wanted warmth. I knew I would die from hypothermia if I stayed there any longer. I don't know why, but I found myself to be rather sleepy. Every one of my survival instincts told me that I had to stay awake. But no matter how hard I tried, I found myself drifting off. When I woke up, it was sundown. In my sleep, I had somehow picked up a small glowing crystal. At the time, I didn't know what it was. I certainly didn't expect it to change my life forever. All I knew was that it was warm and I needed warmth. That night was harsh again, but I made it through. The next day, I realized that I needed food. I couldn't sustain myself off of ice for too much longer. As I explored the surrounding area, I found only barren trees. No fruit to eat, no animals to hunt. I was alone. When I returned to the cave, I had an overwhelming sense of dread. I was afraid that my only source of food would be from a nearby village that I could only get to after the winter was over. I couldn't wait that long. I had a few days at most. Again, I felt sleepy. When I woke up, I found a small leaf on my chest. I didn't know where it came from, and it certainly looked poisonous, but I didn't have any other options. I slowly took a bite. I was still a little hungry afterwards, but I didn't feel sick, so I knew the leaf wasn't poisonous at least. After another harsh night, I woke up to a rather surprising sight. The cave felt bigger somehow. I again scoured the local surroundings for anything that I could find, but found nothing. So I went back to the cave and slept, finding another leaf when I woke up. Over time, I began to realize what the crystal was. It was a dungeon's heart, and by eating the leaf, I became the dungeon's master. Still, I couldn't complain. If I hadn't found the dungeon, I would have died. The crystal provided food, it provided shelter, it provided warmth. Unfortunately, it came with a drawback. I became part of the dungeon itself. If I tried to leave, I would feel weak, eventually falling asleep and waking back up in the dungeon. Still, the crystal provided anything and everything I could need, including companions like slimes, trolls, and orcs. I found myself naturally wanting to provide for these creatures, and build a huge labyrinth in the middle of the mountain. Eventually, the labyrinth was too small, so I built multiple floors for my new friends to live in. Somehow, the bigger the dungeon was, the more powerful I felt. I could have hoarded the power for myself, but I found a way to distribute it among all my minions instead. This meant that even the slimes in my dungeon were nearly indestructible. After all, I didn't really want to see any of them hurt. Unfortunately, this meant that when explorers found my dungeon, they were drawn to it as a place to conquer. For this reason, I needed to keep creating even bigger and more intelligent friends. One of them in particular was a vampire named Isabelle. She was sweet and charming and became my companion through thick and thin. Anytime a minion fell sick, she was there with me to nurse them back to health. She was quick to step in and mediate any issues that might arise between different groups. Frankly, it was worth giving her a little blood every now and again. Unfortunately, one day Isabelle and I had a fight about the direction of the dungeon. She wanted to hoard mana at the bottom so she could become more powerful and protect the dungeon even better. I told her it was unnecessary because I was already distributing it to all the creatures, and they were plenty strong enough. After a heated exchange, I found myself outside of the dungeon without the heart. She had won, I lost my dungeon. As I walked around the surrounding area, I found it to be quite different than how it was when I found the cave so many years ago. It was spring. There were fruit trees everywhere. The birds were singing. I found myself aimlessly walking towards a babbling brook where I sat along the bank for a while. I don't know exactly how long I was there, but long enough that the sun started to set. I then cupped some water into my hands and splashed it onto my face. Afterwards, I didn't recognize the reflection that was looking back at me. My skin had somehow become dark red. I had grown horns from my forehead. My eyes were pitch black. I was a dungeon master through and through. But I didn't have to be anymore. I could do anything. It was spring. The world was now open to me. I stayed near my dungeon and lived off the land for the next few months. I also found a simple coat with a hood and managed to go down to the local village and get some food. It was great. I loved my newfound sense of freedom. One day, I built up the courage to enter my dungeon once again, with the intention of working out some form of agreement with Isabelle. Unfortunately, when I entered the dungeon, it was empty. There were no slimes, no trolls, no orcs. Everyone was gone. I made my way down to the second floor, then the third, then the fourth. Every floor was the same, completely empty. I then heard shouting coming from the basement. I rushed in to see what was going on and saw Isabelle desperately fighting against a party of 4 adventurers. Simply put, she was no match and eventually was defeated as well. I watched as the adventurers pulled my heart from her grasp and began celebrating their accomplishment of completely defeating the dungeon. They then saw me lurking in the shadows and pulled out their weapons once again, this time pointing them towards me. The leader asked, "What are you doing here? Are you part of the dungeon as well?" To which I simply answered, "No, I just wanted to see what the commotion was about." That seemed to satisfy them. They then left me, with each footstep as a beat of my heart. I was truly alone for the first time that I could remember. There were many emotions swirling around me at the time. Sadness for the loss of all my friends and the destruction of everything I had built. Yet, somehow, even in that tragedy, there was hope. After all, I was now free. So, my own writing aside, I really like the idea that the dungeon master is like protecting everyone in their dungeon. And I like this idea that like they had a heart, they built their entire world around this dungeon. And then like it was stolen from them by people who didn't know any better and couldn't really understand the gravity of the situation that they had created, you know? Okay, and that's it for today. That's the story. This was the first time while writing a story that I got like really significant feedback from the YouTube live chat. And it was really exciting. I really enjoyed people kind of going back and forth and like giving me phrases I could even use while I'm writing. It was actually really fun and I want to do more of that. But like, again, like I said at the start of this video, I kind of suck and my anxiety is like, it's really killing me with the live streams. I don't know what it is. It could be just the voice training. It could be like 100 different other things. But long story short, I do want to do more live streams and I want to do more writing like this. But it's going to be just a little bit of time because I need to just figure myself out first, you know? So I'm going to try to do more. I promise I'll try to do more. Just give me some time and we'll get there. Thanks again for watching and I'll see you next time.